Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished lawyer, an activist, and a filmmaker from Arizona, USA, Pearlette Ramos. Pearlette, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Paulette is a civil rights lawyer. She's a social justice advocate. She's an entrepreneur and a filmmaker. She's produced and co-directed her first award-winning feature documentary film titled Three Extraordinary Women. So, Paulette, before we talk about all the work that you're doing, can you share with me your own memories of your childhood in Youngstown, Ohio, and how those experiences shaped you and your worldview?
Well, that actually is the subject of my documentary, at least
Yeah.
my personal story, along with the two other women. But just to give you a snapshot, I would say I had many memories. Some were sweet, some were not. The sweet memories were like many children in childhood. I watched my parents dance and communicate with each other in positive times. They loved Aretha Franklin, for those
Mhm.
who are familiar with her work.
Mhm.
We spent time with extended family during the holidays, and in the summer, we went to family reunions. Those were the good times.
Mhm.
And then there was a host of challenging times as well that were full of pain. I was raised in a public housing community, and poverty. Our home was riddled with substance abuse and domestic violence,
Mhm.
which resulted in child abuse.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize it until much later in life that what I experienced was trauma.
Mhm.
I didn't even have the words for that, but I of course, came to understand what that meant. However, I had dreams as a little one, as children normally do,
Yeah.
that my life would be improved at some point. And
Mhm.
so I probably should mention one other thing that was significant, and that is that by the time I was about 15 years old,
Mhm.
I had dropped out of high school and got married and pregnant.
Mhm.
And my daughter died of acute bronchial
Oh,
pneumonia when
sorry.
she was
Mm.
4 months old, and I was 16. All of those things significantly impacted me
Mm.
and the person that I would become.
Amazing. And after, such an amazing childhood, and thank you for sharing some of your painful memories as well. Who or what inspired you during your early years to envision a life beyond the challenges you had faced?
Couple things that you just said that was significant. You thanked me for sharing some of my difficulties. I normally start with that because
Mhm.
so often people see where individuals end up and they don't know the journey that they took.
Yeah.
And I like to dispel the belief that somehow it was easy or full of joy. It was actually full of pain, full of pain.
Yeah.
And through that resilience and I'll say post-traumatic growth, I was able to realize quite a bit of my dream. So you asked what inspired me. Uh, so I've watched television as a little girl. And one of the people that I saw on television was the French explorer, Jacques Cousteau.
Hmm.
He was a conservationist and a filmmaker, a photographer, and a researcher. And I would watch him scuba dive and explore the sea.
Hmm.
And when I saw him doing all of those things, I would close my eyes and imagine
Oh, wow.
that it was me.
Hmm.
And I think the power of my imagination and really wanting to explore uh, the world, not just the sea, but the
Hmm.
world, conjured in me the possibility that I could live that type of experience. The only problem is I grew up in public housing, like I mentioned. I didn't know
Yeah, you did.
how
Hmm.
it would happen. I just believed that it was possible.
Hmm. Amazing. And then, you had so many different experiences and so many different types of motivation. And this gentleman you spoke about scuba diving. Why did you choose to
Mm.
pursue law as a tool to
Mm.
create change for women and children?
I actually happened into the law as a profession. I didn't have a thing per se that I wanted to do.
Mm,
I really just wanted to be happy because
mm,
I was an unhappy little girl.
mm,
And then I was working in a public housing community once I graduated from college in North Carolina,
mm,
helping women to become self-sufficient. It was a national pilot program, and so I was providing life skills courses. We were removing barriers to people achieving, their dreams.
mhm,
And I came upon the phrase that was coined by a psychologist by the name of Martin Seligman, and
mhm,
the phrase was learned helplessness.
mm,
And this was like in the 80s, late 80s. And I saw how people who were capable, talented women mostly, didn't believe that they were, that they had experienced the system, experienced various challenges, and had come to believe that
mm,
somehow they weren't capable because of their life circumstances.
mm,
And that, because I grew up thinking the opposite, even though
mm.
I was in similar circumstances, it was the first time where I thought, well, why? How is this possible?
Right.
And it inspired me because I wanted to change the laws that disproportionately impacted women and children.
Yeah.
And at that time, many people who were in Congress were
Mm,
actually lawyers. So I
mm,
did a bit of research and found that out. And my aim was actually to become a representative or a senator at that time. So going to law school was the first step towards that road of working to create legislation or
mhm,
policy
mm.
that really got to the heart of um, what impacts people. And so often we're focused on money.
Yeah.
That's the driver for policy. And I believe that it's a bit more deeper or a bit more deep than money.
Hmm.
It really goes to what's in the hearts and minds of individuals to
Correct.
whether they feel like they can improve the quality of their lives or not.
Wow. Thank you. And can you talk a little bit about your work with the Arizona Lawyers for Equal Justice and the impact this has had on the community?
Oh, sure. So the Arizona Lawyers for Equal Justice is a group of concerned lawyers and judges who come together to discuss barriers and access to justice issues. We do a number of activities together, including creating educational opportunities for lawyers and for judges through the state bar. So
Hmm.
we facilitate community conversations about access to justice
Right.
issues.
Right.
We host events in the community as well to raise awareness, and we collaborate with other community groups like and law schools. There are a couple local law schools within Arizona,
Mm,
uh, and provide programming within those environments as well as for law students to really raise our awareness about the barriers that are in place that keep people from experiencing access to justice.
mm. Wow. When I was reading about you and preparing for my conversation with you, I was also fascinated about the term resilience coaching. I'd love to get your perspective on what role does resilience play in your efforts to empower individuals and communities?
Oh my God, it's central to everything that I do.
Mm,
So, resilience as a definition is basically the ability to adapt to change and one's ability to recover from difficult experiences. And I think we're actually all resilient,
yeah.
or we all have the capacity to be resilient
Hmm.
despite whatever's happening in our lives, but we don't
Mm,
necessarily think of it that way. So
mm,
it's incredibly impactful because it provides a framing, and actually to some degree, that's what the film is about. We tell our traumatic stories, the things that happen to us, but we also frame it in what we that we had an ability within ourselves
mm,
to transform those difficult life circumstances into into action. And
mm.
each of us, each of the three women who are featured in the film, that's we had very different childhood experiences,
Yeah.
but we each made it mean that we could adapt and change and then use what happened in order to shape who we were, but also to shape the environment around us by becoming social justice and civil rights advocates.
Absolutely. And I'm going to come to your film in after two or three questions. But my next
Mhm.
question for you, Paulette, is how does your own entrepreneurial spirit manifest in your various ventures and community work?
What is my entrepreneurial spirit? Oh my gosh. That is such a great so first of all, I tend to have a lot of ideas
Mhm,
about, how things should go. I'm an independent thinker. I like to problem solve.
mhm,
I am very much passionate about communicating to others and bringing people together to make a positive impact and difference. And and so those traits that I have culminated in my wanting to create
mhm,
products and services that really meet the needs of individuals and then to work alongside others to
mhm.
bring that reality into being.
Very interesting. And how do interdisciplinary studies like financial inclusion and coaching enhance your own ability to serve others?
Well, so there's a couple things. I serve on a few boards in Arizona.
Mhm,
One of them is a credit union board, which is called 1AZ, where I advocate for financial inclusion because so many, well, first of all, the vast majority of our systems, whether it be healthcare, education, the criminal justice system, is based upon finances. Our ability to get a home is based upon finances.
mhm,
And many people have been systemically excluded from gaining access to wealth and capital, which is germane to having a fulfilling life for many people.
mhm,
They just don't, they don't have access. And so that's one of the ways in which I use my advocacy as a member of the credit union board
mhm.
focused there. The other part of your question, tell me what it was. Oh,
Yeah.
what was the other part of your
So I was what's
question?
going on. How do interdisciplinary studies like financial inclusion and coaching enhance your ability
Oh,
to
God.
serve others?
Yeah, that the coaching was the other part. So I became a coach many
Mhm,
years ago
mhm,
as a result of having a coach.
mhm,
And so they say coaching isn't for people who need it, it's for people who want it.
mhm,
And many years ago, I'm going to say more than 20 years ago, I had my first coaching experience. I actually hired a coach
mhm,
to help me focus on the period of life that I was in. And I
mhm,
was so taken by the skills that the person used in communicating into a self-reflection. I decided to go and become certified through Coaching's Training Institute, actually,
mhm.
because I was very much interested in being able to incorporate and use those skills in my daily life. And I
Mhm.
use them everywhere, all the
Okay.
time.
Amazing.
And what that basically means is I go into inquiry with people in order to help deepen the conversation about who they are, what they're wanting, what they are dreaming of.
Mhm, mhm,
If they experience barriers, we talk about what those are by my asking questions because I believe every person is creative,
mhm.
resourceful, and whole, and they
Yeah.
have the inner answers within themselves.
Hmm. Well said.
So those skills just help to bring those answers out, obviously.
Very interesting. So, two more questions relating to your work as a civil rights lawyer, and then I want to ask you
Mm.
some questions on your documentary. Can you share some pivotal moments from your work on gender and racial equality initiatives?
Sure. So I mentioned that I'm located in Arizona. One of the things that I have contributed my time and talent to has been creating leadership programs.
Mhm.
I believe we are all leaders in our own lived
Yeah.
experience,
Mhm,
and sometimes people have a desire to assume a leadership role where they have a more broad impact on their community. And so often women don't feel like they have what's necessary, like there's a gap, right?
Yeah.
We've heard of the imposter syndrome, many of us,
Mm,
and it's just not true. And so I've had the privilege of working with Arizona Foundation for Women to
mm,
create a leadership program that really speaks to it being heart-centered, focused leadership. I'm utilizing leadership principles, but also going a bit deeper into the conversation of what does authentic leadership look like from a
right.
courageous
Yeah.
standpoint, and the courage being fully present in the world and not necessarily feeling like you have to fit into a mold in order to lead successfully. So that's one
Yeah.
example from
Mm,
a leadership
mm,
standpoint.
mm.
I would just add from a civil rights standpoint, one of the areas that I've worked in, well, I'll mention two. One actually is not within the state of Arizona. I do some
Mhm.
work outside of Arizona
Yeah.
as well. And
Mm,
that is regarding doing civil rights investigations and providing support to organizations who would like an external third party to investigate
mhm.
claims of discrimination, to help them make a determination whether
Right.
some behavior has been engaged in that should not have been, and
Mm,
then to provide strategies for how to improve culture if there are cultural challenges
mm.
within the environment. And then one last thing that
Yeah.
I'll mention is I'm consulting currently with um, a public defender's office
Mhm.
who has a team working to help prevent someone from getting the death penalty. I find quite a bit of joy in that work in particular, in part because I'm helping them use storytelling in a
Right.
compelling way to humanize the
Mm,
person who may be subject to death in
mm.
Arizona.
Wow. Wow. And based on your own amazing story and your journey, what advice would you give to young women of color? And I've often disputed this word women of color because I said white is also a color, and why is anyone who's non-white is a person of color? But what advice would you give to women of color aspiring to make a difference in their communities?
Hmm. I love this question.
Hmm.
I typically, when I get asked this, I think about what would have helped me.
Correct.
And one of the ways in which I think sometimes I know that I struggle, and I think sometimes others struggle, is really listening to their own inner voice and cultivating a relationship with yourself.
Mm,
So often we're taught, and particularly women, to take care of others and to develop relationships, with a spouse or partner or with work,
mm.
but we don't necessarily get support and encouragement to cultivate a deep connection with yourself, to
Yeah.
listen to and understand your own authentic voice,
Mm,
to use intuition, to trust your intuition, and to give voice to the yearnings in your own heart. So
mm.
that would be the advice.
Amazing. Well said. Paulette, I want to talk a little bit about your award-winning feature documentary, Three Extraordinary Women. And my first question is, how did Mount Kilimanjaro journey serve as a metaphor for overcoming adversity in the film?
Well, I started off by telling you I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. So,
Absolutely. But I
so
thought
I
I thought
consider
he was in the wide open oceans and not up in the
he
mountains.
was in the ocean, but
Okay.
it's the spirit of Jacques Cousteau. So
Yes,
he was an
absolutely.
explorer.
Yes.
He was an explorer,
Yeah.
and he loved the great outdoors. And so
Correct.
I am an explorer, and
Mm.
I love the great outdoors. And there were actually two women that I know who climbed Mount
Manjaro.
Kilimanjaro in, I don't know, probably 15 years ago.
Wow.
And they inspired me. Like a little seed was planted in my
Mhm.
mind at the time that I
Mm.
thought, could I do that? And I was scared and intimidated, but excited all at the same time,
Mm.
which meant for me that is something I wanted to consider
Mm.
at some point in the future. So
Right.
then fast forward, I decided, it's time that I get Kilimanjaro handled. So I
Mm.
reached out to my Facebook friends, posted a link and said, "Hey, I'm interested in climbing Kilimanjaro. Is there anyone who would like to do that with me?" And
Mm.
then two brave women stepped forward to say yes. And that's how the vision for the hike happened. And then once I started seeing the similarities in our lived
Mm.
experiences, the story started to emerge to use the experiences that they had, their own personal Kilimanjaros, because that's what we refer to it, their traumas, their own personal Kilimanjaro, and to liken it to climbing a mountain, which, you have to prepare for it. Sometimes it feels daunting. Sometimes it's really hard and you don't feel like going on, and you know that the summit is there. And so it became just the perfect metaphor for overcoming not just your own personal Kilimanjaro stories, but also the collective Kilimanjaro, which are the systems of oppression that disproportionately impact women and children around the world.
Oh, wonderful. I have time for just two more questions now. My next question is, how do you hope the film contributes to ending violence against women and undoing racism?
Well, I get to announce to you and your viewers that our film was selected to be screened at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women on March the 11th,
Congratulations.
2025. I am elated. I have a vision for this film to be used as an educational tool globally to help encourage and inspire girls and women to find their own voice, to see their Kilimanjaro as a mountain that they can summit.
Yeah.
And also in that same vein, for communities of color who may be suppressed or oppressed to find their power, which is really centered within.
Yeah, very interesting. And my last question for you, Pearlette, given the vast number of things that you do, from being an activist to a lawyer to an entrepreneur to a filmmaker, what is next for you in the journey as a filmmaker and a social justice advocate?
What is next? My primary objective is the social impact campaign. So so you don't know this about me, and you might cut this, but one of my friends, my best friends actually, is Rajvinder Shell. She's from India. I love her family, and her dad, before he died, he was in his 80s. He gave me this golden piece of advice. I'm 55 years old, and I was maybe 50 at the time. And he said, Pearlette, your life is not your own. It belongs, to be used to be of service to other people.
Correct.
And no one had ever phrased it quite like that. Like, I've had a life of service. I care deeply about humanity and what happens. I mean, I have a particular passion for women's issues, but the way he framed that really inspired in me this idea that I had, that I live with now, which is I live a life of service. And so what does that mean? That means that I submit my will to the divine service, which means that however I can be used, my talents, I've gained a lot of talents in the last 40 years of working and contributing. I offer them, I just offer them in service.
How amazing.
So that's what's in the future. I'd like to focus obviously on the social impact campaign because there's a lot that goes with getting a film not just produced, but now in the world and used in a meaningful way. So I'm going to be focusing my attention on that and centering that on the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women that comes up in March.
Wow. And on that note, Pearlette, thank you so much for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. I must say, you've overcome your challenges and achieved a hell of a lot in the last 4 decades. Thank you for speaking to me about your journey as a civil rights lawyer, all the work you're doing with the Arizona Lawyers for Equal Justice. Thank you for talking to me about resilience, your entrepreneurial spirit. You gave some great advice for young women of color. And thank you for producing such an amazing documentary, Three Extraordinary Women. Good luck with the release at the United Nations. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Just search for the brand called you.